March Madness in 2025 can be summed up with one word, and that word is boring. You see, what makes March Madness special every year is the potential for amazing storytelling, with these Cinderella teams having an opportunity to go out there and make a name for themselves. Teams that we haven't talked about all year, teams that the national media hasn't covered in 10 plus years, are now all over headlines across America. However, the same can't be said for this year's March Madness, and that's because there haven't been any real major upsets. All of the 13th through 16th seeds lost in the round of 64, with the biggest upsets being a couple 12th seeds. You have Colorado State taking down Memphis and McNeese taking down Clemson. And don't even get me started on this McNeese team, because if there was ever a time where sports media was desperate for a story, it's with this team. You see, the issue with McNeese is that while they are solid and well-rounded, they don't have a player that stands out on the score sheet. 5 of their best players average anywhere from 9 to 12 points. I'm talking Javon Garcia, Sincere Parker, Christian Charmante, DJ Richards Jr., and Quader Copeland. They don't have a superstar that has an X factor on the team that the media can push. And it's not like they have a head coach with a loud personality. I mean, Will Wade is great, and he's done a fantastic job with these boys. However, it's not like Will Wade himself is going out, talking to the media, and getting quotes off left and right. However, NC State did see some potential in this guy. They gave him a 6-year deal. And he isn't the only one going to NC State, because Amir the team's student manager, will be following Will Wade to NC State. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about McNeese's student manager, it's because he's gone viral recently heading into and during March Madness. And all this guy really does is walk down the tunnel with the team with a speaker around his neck, dancing to the music that they're playing. And the reason it's gone so viral is because it's kind of goofy to see him dancing with the basketball players, and that's why it went viral. And then you've got the cheerleaders wearing his face on their socks. They also got t-shirts of Amir Khan. He's really gone viral for not doing anything, but again, no hate to the guy. He didn't ask for any of this. He's gotten 12 NIL deals out of it. He's made hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, Insomnia Cookie, Fortnite, Buffalo Wild Wings, TickPicks, all of these sponsors are now sponsoring a student manager, and that's great for him. But I think it says a lot as to where we are with the current state of college basketball. Because if the biggest story to come out of March Madness is about a team student manager and not about what's actually happening on the court, then that must mean this March Madness has been pretty underwhelming. And McNeese didn't even make it out of the round of 32. In fact, out of the 5 double-digit seeds that made it to the round of 32, only one has advanced to the Sweet 16, and that is a number 10 seeded Arkansas, who's being coached by John Calipari. And honestly, this is the only kind of real underdog left in the fight, and we're only in the round of 16. Now, did I want John Calipari and Arkansas to make it this far? Of course not. I mean, I had St. John and Rick Pitino winning it all. So if there was any underdog I didn't want to see, it was this Arkansas team. But I guess if my pick to win it all is eliminated this early in the tournament, I might as well root for the only underdog remaining in March Madness. And that is the Arkansas Razorbacks and John Calipari. And this is a great story here, because John Calipari was a legendary coach at Kentucky, but his last few seasons there weren't so kind. He only won 1 March Madness game out of his last 5 years. It had been a pretty rough stint for him, and in his first season with the Razorbacks, he's already won 2 games in March Madness, which I think says a lot about him as a coach, and that some of those failures in the past with Kentucky don't all lay on him. It was more or less the players, right? And he had some star-studded players come through his program. But now that he's with the Razorbacks, he's gotten an opportunity to redeem himself and really fix his legacy here. Because towards the end, like I said, John Calipari's name just didn't hit the same. However, if Calipari is able to keep his boys dancing into the Final Four, then you can write this off as a very successful season for the Razorbacks. And there's only one real team that stands in their way of doing so. And we'll talk more about that team in a second, but for right now, I wanted to remind you guys to slow down, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 10,000. Every subscription is greatly appreciated, so please subscribe. But let's get back to talking about that team. Now, of course, that is the 1-seeded team in the West region, Florida. Now, Florida is not only the 1 seed in the West, but they're also the best team in the country and one of 4 1 seeds still remaining in this tournament. Because then you also have Auburn, who's a good team, the oldest team in the NCAA right now. A reason as for why they're so good is because they've got a lot of veteran presence throughout their lineup. And then, of course, you also have a different 1 seed in Duke, who may not have the best team or the oldest, but they have the best player by far, and that is Cooper Flagg, who's been an absolute phenom for Duke. And Duke has gone through this story before, where they have a phenom coming out of high school like a Zion Williamson or a Jason Tatum, who ends up getting drafted really high, but in the NCAA tournament in March Madness, they don't really show up. And I know that Cooper Flagg had an injury heading into March Madness. However, he seems to have bounced back from that pretty well and has been playing in some of Duke's later games in the tournament, so he'll be ready to go when the real competition comes Duke's way. And last but not least, you have Houston, who somehow always manages to find themselves being a 1 seed, but they don't really do anything with their high ranking, and yes, they will win 30 games this season, but they can never seem to figure out how to win the 6 games that matter most in March. Hell, they narrowly survived their round of 32 game against Gonzaga, who were looking to make a late push in the second half. However, the Cougars were able to hold them off thanks to their senior guard, LJ Cryer, who had himself a night. 30 points on 8 for 15 from the field, 6 for 11 from the three-point line, and was perfect from the free throw line. Shot 8 for 8, had 2 rebounds, 3 assists, an all-around great game for LJ Cryer. He also had a solid round of 64 game and is a big reason as to why the Cougars are now in the Sweet 16. They're going up against a 4-seeded Purdue team who hasn't had a real challenge all tournament, and I think Houston will be able to take care of them. The real challenge comes between the winners of Kentucky and Tennessee, because I believe whoever wins that game is coming out of the Midwest region. But who knows, maybe Houston has a few tricks up their sleeve and they don't fall short of expectations again. What I do know is that if Arkansas ends up losing, then the only underdogs to really root for in this year's March Madness are a handful of 6 seeds. And even then, a 6th seed isn't that crazy to root for. I mean, you got Illinois, you have Ole Miss, BYU. Maybe if BYU makes a run, that'll be cool. But the only disappointing thing about this year's March Madness is there's no true underdog story. And even if you want to count Arkansas, that's not a real underdog. I mean, they have John Calipari, for crying out loud. I don't know how to spell it out for you, but it has been very boring. The only positive that you really get with all of these big schools winning is that maybe it'll make for more exciting games further down the road. We've only had 1 or 2 buzzer beaters so far in this tournament, and even then, it's like the teams you wanted to win in those buzzer beater games didn't end up winning. So a bunch of heartbreak if you're a college basketball fan, or if you're just a casual who tunes in every March to watch the sport and didn't check it out beforehand. March Madness just hasn't been the best incentive to get those kinds of people to go out and watch a full season of college basketball. However, if you're still going to tune into the Sweet 16, a game I do recommend is Duke versus Arizona, because Arizona has Caleb Love. And if you're in the college basketball world, you'll recognize this name. He spent his first few seasons with North Carolina, rival to Duke, so there is already some bad blood there, and Caleb Love has been carrying Arizona throughout this tournament. I mean, in their game against Oregon, the only reason Arizona pulled through was because they rode the back of Caleb Love. He had 29 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. And if there's a game I recommend you go back and watch, it's this Oregon versus Arizona game, because all of Caleb Love's talents are on full display, and he is coming for Cooper Flagg. So like I said, that'll be exciting. That has some potential there. But for the most part, that's about it for my summary into March Madness so far. It has been boring, but there is a chance that it can still turn around if things play out the right way. But like I said, I'll catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces. Sin City wasn't made for you. Oh.